Hey everyone, welcome to Cass Chats. Obviously, I'm Cass. On this YouTube channel, I'll be talking about everything they tell you not to talk about at the family dinner table. I'll be talking about politics, race, religion, and everything in between. So without further ado, welcome to episode 1. In true Black Eyed Peas inspired fashion, it's called Where is the Love? So I'm sure if you get on social media at all, whether it's 30 seconds or you're on there scrolling for an hour, you can understand that there's a lot of hate and division in the world. And obviously, I'm sure as you know, that's not like a new thing. That's something that happens all the time. But in any event, it seems like it's happening more so now. Like a lot of people are just depressed and sad, and it's hard to not notice that the gap is widening, so to speak. So anyways, as I said, I'm sure if you go on social media and stuff like that, you can notice that. And obviously, I think that that is becoming more prevalent because it's an election year, the Olympics are going on. There's just a lot of things that worsen that situation as far as like division and hate in the world. And I want to talk about the idea, obviously, like I said, where is the love, right? And I think there's a big misconception in the Christian community, but in the world in general, of what that's supposed to look like, okay? So I think a lot of us, like I said, we're divided because we're like, well, you're a Democrat and I'm a Republican, and so we don't like each other, and we have different opinions, so we can't get along. And I'm straight, and you're gay, or you're trans, or you're this, that, and the third, so we can't get along. We can't have a conversation, right? And I want to just say to you, first off, that's bogus, right? Like, Christ taught us to love each other, not hate each other. It says in John 3:16, for God so loved the world, not hated, not condemned, just putting that out there. It says, for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, that whosoever shall believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And then the next verse, which people forget, it said, God did not send his Son to condemn the world, but to save it. So again, there's this whole idea of like there's division and there's hate and there's all these things going on in the world. But I think the core of it is that we can't just mind our own business, right? And not only that, but we think that, well, if we don't have the same opinions, then we have to hate each other. We can't get along. That's not what we're called to do, okay? And as Christians, I also think there's a misconception. Because, yes, you're called to make disciples and you're called to tell people about God and things like that. But I think in the Christian community, sometimes people do that in a very wrong way, right? Like they're like, well, if you're gay or if you're a Democrat or if you're this, that, the third, like you're going to burn in hell, okay? I get that, all right? And I get that people don't want you to go to hell and have an eternity in hell. But there's a better way to go about that, right? Like, you don't have to say that. And imagine if you are somebody that's not walking in obedience to God, what is that person going to feel like when you're like, well, you're going to burn in hell and like, whatever. You know, that's not showing the love of Christ. That's not making them feel wanted by God, you know? And so, why? Just why would you do that? But I think the world would be such a better place if number one, Christians went about things in a different way, because we are called to be Christ-like. It's not our job to judge, right? Like, I like the saying, leave the judgment to Jesus. Because at the end of the day, when you die, you're either going to go to heaven or hell, right? Like, if you believe in God and if you're a Christian, and even if you're not, sometimes, you know, people that are agnostic or what have you, like, they believe in a higher power, they believe in some sort of heaven and hell or their version of such. But at the end of the day, no matter what you believe in, like, only you can answer for yourself, right? Like, if you're a Christian, when I go to heaven and I get up there with the good Lord above, my mom's not going to be able to answer for me. My best friend's not going to be able to answer to me. Like, it's just going to be me and God, right? So I just don't understand this idea of, like I said, the Christian community being like, well, you're going to burn in hell, and blah, blah, blah. I don't get that. Like, I do, but I don't. I understand that you want people to go to heaven and you don't want people to go to hell and this, that, and the third. But what if instead we said, hey, God loves you. God loves you. God cares about you. I understand that you might not be making the choices that are walking in obedience with God. I might not agree with your choices, but God still loves you and cares about you. And I'd love to have a conversation with you. Like, what if we said that, right? Like, instead of saying all these other hateful things, just because you don't agree with someone, what if you just gave them a seat at your table, right? Like, what if you just said, hey man, God loves you. God still cares about you. I don't agree with your decisions, but I want to talk to you. I want to understand you. I want to get to know you. I want to know what led to you being in the place you're at now, right? Like, the world would be such a better place if we could just do that. And I think, number one, that starts with the Christian community not being holier than thou, not condemning people and leaving the judging to Jesus. And it starts with the Christian community saying, I'm going to love like Christ. I want to be a vessel. I want to be used by God. And when other people look at me, I want them to say, man, I want to know what's going on with them. Like, you want other people to know the love of Christ through you, right? Like, you want to love people so hard and so good that they're like, man, there's something different about you, and I got to figure it out. And we're not doing that. Like, and I'm not saying everyone, but the Christian community is doing a lot of people a disservice by not just being loving and caring and giving somebody a seat at the table. And there's a lot more that goes into this, right? But I think if the Christian community and all these other communities, LGBTQ and all the other communities that don't align with the will of Christ, right? Like, they're not walking in obedience to Christ. If the Christian community and all these other communities would just talk to each other and share the love of Christ, the world would be so much better, like so much better. And I'm not saying that would end all the world's problems, but it would definitely be a start. And I think another thing too, and this just isn't in the Christian community, I think this is for people in general, but we always want to call each other out, right? Like, if I don't agree with you because I'm a Republican and you're a Democrat, or you do this and I don't agree with that, you just, instead of having a conversation, because you have a difference of opinion, you're like, okay, well, I just automatically should hate you. No, like, you're allowed to disagree and still respect a person. You're allowed to have differing opinions and still get something out of the conversation. And I also think that first has to come from a place of, like, when we're having these conversations, you're not going to have a judgmental spirit or vibe or whatever. You're just letting somebody have a seat at your table and having an open and honest conversation. And another thing too is, like, we always want to cast judgment on other people, but, like, we're not thinking about ourselves. And that's a biblical truth too, okay? In Matthew 7:3, and I'm going to be paraphrasing a little bit here, but it talks about the idea of you're caring about the speck of dust in your brother's eye, but you're not worried about the plank that's in your own, okay? And it's the whole idea of, like, stay on your side of the street, right? Like, that's the analogy or what have you that we would use today. But anyways, I feel like I've kind of rambled a bit. But I think that the world truly, truly would be such a better place if, number one, the Christian community would leave the judging to Jesus, and would love like Christ. And two, if we would kind of clean up our side of the street, right? And worry about ourselves before we would cast judgment on other people. And three, give somebody a seat at your table, dang it. Like, that just irritates me. But stop being so judgy. Leave the judgments to Jesus. Go out there and love somebody today. Show the love of Christ. Hope you have a great day.